Gandalf's return as Gandalf the White is a turning point in the story, for up till then, things were looking quite grim for the Fellowship. They had lost their leader in Moria, Boromir had fallen, Frodo and Sam had broken off from the Fellowship, and Merry and Pippin were captured by Uruk-hai. And so, in this moment, we finally get a feeling that the fortune of the Fellowship was about to change for the better. But was Gandalf's transformation just a change in his title and his look, or was he more powerful now? And who brought him back to life? Hey guys, it's Carl here, and in today's episode, we'll be exploring Gandalf's transformation into Gandalf the White. So even though Gandalf managed to defeat the Balrog, he was left fatally wounded from this battle. His body was burnt from the Balrog's fires and injured from its weapons, and he was beyond exhausted, and Gandalf wouldn't manage to survive for much longer. All of these wounds would eventually overcome him, and he would die upon the mountain peak of Zirag-Zigil. Now many of the races and beings of Middle-earth had their own afterlife, where their spirits would travel to after their death. Though in the case of Gandalf, it's not that straightforward, for he was a Maiar spirit, and not a member of the other races. These Maiar spirits were servants of the Valar, who were powerful angelic beings, and it's not very clear what happens to them after their death, since very few of them died in the first place. In the case of Saruman and Sauron, who were also Maiar spirits, they were doomed to remain in a weakened state, a wandering spirit that could never take form again. We also see that after Saruman's death, his spirit tried to go to the Undying Lands, but it wasn't allowed to return, because Saruman had failed in his mission to help and guide the free people. And so in Gandalf's case, could he have returned to the Undying Lands, and did his spirit even go there? So it's impossible to know if Gandalf would have managed to return to the Undying Lands, because it seems that if a wizard died during their mission, it might be considered a failure, and this would stop their spirit from traveling to the Undying Lands. In one of Tolkien's letters, letter 156, he says, "I guess the only thing to know is whether dying would be considered failure, and thus prevent readmittance." Now despite all of this, there are hints that Gandalf's spirit might have actually gone to a much more prestigious place than the Undying Lands, and that his spirit was actually summoned to the halls of Ilúvatar, the one true god of Middle-earth. For Gandalf said that he passed out of thought and time, and the only place that we know of that was beyond the dimension of time was the timeless halls where Ilúvatar lived. There is also another quote to back this up from letter 156. He was sent by a mere prudent plan of the angelic Valar or governors, but authority had taken up this plan and enlarged it at the moment of its failure. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done. Sent back by whom and whence? Not by the gods, whose business is only with this embodied world and its time. This quote tells us that something greater than the Valar, which was the authority, had sent back Gandalf, and this is referring to Ilúvatar. Now when the wizards were first sent to Middle-earth, their powers were limited, and they were given weak forms of old men, for their job was to guide and help the free people through wisdom, and not to impress or command them by showing off their power. When Gandalf was sent back as Gandalf the White, it seems that Ilúvatar had given him his full power, and he could use it on very rare occasions when the physical threat of Sauron's armies was too great. Tolkien says, "The wizards as such had failed, or if you like, the crisis had become too grave and needed an enhancement of power. So Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced and returned. Both his wisdom and power are much greater. When he speaks he commands attention. The old Gandalf could not have dealt so with Théoden nor with Saruman. He is still under the obligation of concealing his power and of teaching rather than forcing or dominating wills. But where the physical powers of the enemy are too great for the goodwill of the opposers to be effective, he can act in emergency as an angel." There is actually a moment in the books where we catch a glimpse of Gandalf using his full power, for during the siege of Gondor, he would use it to release a white beam of light towards the Nazgûl to stop them from chasing after Faramir. Now after Gandalf's spirit was sent back into his body, he woke up upon the mountain peak of Zirag-Zigil, and he was rescued by Gwaihir the Eagle. Even though he was now stronger, his body was still injured from his battle with the Balrog, and he was taken to Lothlorien, where his wounds were healed, and Galadriel would give him a set of white radiant robes. Those that surrounded Gandalf would notice that something changed about him, for Gwaihir says, "A burden you have been, but not so now. Light as a swan's feather in my claw you are. The sun shines through you." Which to me sounds like he transcended in some way, and that he was closer to his pure Maiar form. Now these changes weren't only physical, and it seems that his thoughts and memories were also affected. Gandalf says, "I have forgotten much that I thought I knew, and learned again much that I had forgotten. I can see many things far off." I feel that this links back to the limits that had once been set on the wizards, and that perhaps it might have also restricted some of the knowledge that they had acquired in Valinor, almost like it was metaphorically locked away from them. But now that Gandalf was empowered and closer to his original Maiar form, he was able to recall it. But in the process, he might have also forgotten some things that he had learned in his weakened state, when he was closer to a mortal experience. We also see this loss of his identity and knowledge when he meets the Tree Hunters and says, "Gandalf. Yes, that was the name. I was Gandalf. Yes, you may still call me Gandalf." There is another aspect in his empowerment, which is never proved or disproved, but it's worth mentioning. For Gandalf tells the Tree Hunters that he was now more dangerous than anything they will ever face, apart from Sauron, and that none of them had any weapon that could hurt him. And again, this is never proved to be true. We never actually see him being attacked by a blade, though I can't see how it might be metaphorical. Whatever the case, it really shows us how truly powerful Gandalf had become. Now you might ask, since Saruman was also called the White, does that mean that he too was as powerful as Gandalf? And the answer is that the colors didn't show power or how strong the wizards were, and the whole point of Gandalf becoming the White was to show that he was replacing Saruman as the head of the Wizard Order. He was a lot more powerful than him at this point, for we see him breaking Saruman's staff and overcoming his spell over Theoden. How do you guys feel about Gandalf's transformation? Do you think that he changed a lot in character? And what do you feel he was now capable of with his new powers? I've always felt that this is one of the coolest and most interesting parts in the books, because Ilúvatar rarely intervened in the history of Middle-earth, and that he chose to make an exception for Gandalf and empower him so that he could continue his mission really shows us how important Gandalf was for the victory of the free people. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons. You guys really helped to make this channel possible, and I deeply appreciate your support, especially my Wizard-Tier Patrons: Jacob Williams, Michelangelo, T. Gorman, James Tudgel, Mike Feeney, and Roland Mervold. If you too would like to help and support this channel while unlocking some cool perks, I'll be leaving a link to my Patreon page in the video description. I'll also be leaving links to our Facebook page, Instagram, Discord, and Twitter communities, so follow us if you'd like to have some extra Lord of the Rings lore in your day-to-day lives. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, it really helps the channel, and subscribe to join our fellowship today. I hope to see you all in my next video, where together we'll once again explore the magical world and lore of Middle-earth.